3,000 reported rapes. That's an average of 109 rapes a day. With anti-abuse campaigns popping up like the international social media campaign Me Too that many South African women, including prominent singer Jennifer Ferguson, got involved with, it's clear that women are taking a stand saying enough.
Yeah, now joining us is the Soranang Legal Advocacy Centre, Lisa Vetten. Thank you very much indeed for your time, Lisa. You heard the minister, you heard his talk. It's tough talk. What's your reaction?
It's probably not useful. Because I think when you tell people, take a tough approach, use force, be hard, you get the kind of response you heard from that police officer on the line to the woman who tried to report an assault case. The police need to understand they're not a police force, they're a police service. Now, if you train people to respond harshly, and if you train them to think that they are the authorities, nobody must question them, when you get a victim saying, but what's happening to my case, and asking questions, they're going to respond hard, because who do you think you are to be asking me as the authority my questions? And they will use bullying, intimidating and violent language.
But then he would say if you tell people they're servants and they should be all cushy and all nice, they won't be able to deal with hardened criminals.
You need different things in different... I think the problem here is that they're not training people, the police officers, to know what skills to use in what context. The person she was speaking to sounds like somebody who works behind the desk. They are not required to deal with criminals, they are not required to use force. They're required to be pleasant and polite to the community. You need those more forceful attitudes with people who might be doing things like cash and transit heists, for instance. So I think it's being able to train the police to know which skills to use when. It's inexcusable that people who work behind a desk respond like that because they're not facing danger regularly.
Just a quick one. Is it police culture? We had experts saying this is a culture across those service providers. Is that fair enough to say?
You know, I think culture depends on the police station. So I would be very interested to take a look at what's going on in Midrand to produce that kind of response. Because you can go to some police stations, and I've had this experience, where you get a better response. So a lot of it has to do with the management at that particular station, because they set the tone, from the station commander down to the shift commanders, down to the detective or the uniform branch. So I would be looking at that station as the particular problem or the microcosm. I think there is a problem across the police, but it tends to get worsened under some circumstances. So I mean, just to build on that, if you find stations like Khayelitsha, and the minister spoke of Inqobo, those are stations that are highly under-resourced. If you look at the capacity they have in comparison to other stations, it's far less. So one of the consequences of under-resourcing stations in that way is that you are going to get people who are short-tempered, difficult, or only want to do what they can do because they're trying to keep as many demands out of their lives as possible, don't necessarily have the training to cope with what's going on. So I would say that the minister should move away from a language of force to actually look at how do you build this organisation. Over the last couple of years, it's been pulled into the political factionalism that's gone on in the ANC, and it's been used as a tool in political wars. Policing, the actual work of policing and crime, has been allowed to vanish and be less of a priority in the face of that sort of political manoeuvring. And what they've got to really do is try and rebuild the organisation. Are the right people in those jobs, or are they political appointees? Where are our resources going? Are we making sure that where we have the biggest problems, we're giving our best trained officers, and we're calculating a proper police to community ratio so that you have enough police officers to deal with the crime. So I wouldn't be going out, you know, it's nice and easy to say, oh, go and show force. You need to rather do a good, careful analysis of the problem as a totality, and then try and fix up the systemic and structural origins, not single out individuals and just say go out and shoot it up.
Yeah, there's a real concern here, in particular this incident. Do you think incidents like these will further increase the fear and reluctance of people to report crime?
They certainly can do. I mean, there's a great deal of negativity towards the police as it is. If you look at things like the Khayelitsha Commission of Inquiry, there you had a situation where the community was turning to vigilantism. They were assaulting, beating and even killing suspects. That's a very undesirable situation. But that comes from a real sense of deep frustration that you don't believe the police, they're not going to do anything about your matter, they're probably corrupt anyway, so you may as well just sort the problem out yourself. And that's a very dangerous situation, because that's when you're talking about a real breakdown of your social fabric, when people lose trust in their institutions.
Well, then, will it help him making, like he said to us, he's going to make a big example of this person who's been caught on record? Will that be powerful?
Clearly that person does need to be disciplined. Their behaviour is utterly unacceptable, but they are a symptom. You can't treat them as the only problem. They're a symptom of something much deeper. So I would much rather suggest to the minister, yes, look at that station, look more broadly. Take a systemic approach, because that's not the only person who's doing that. Look at how you are training your officers. Are they getting sufficient training in terms of learning to how to behave like servants of the people, rather than skopskit and donor, don't you argue with me types?
In terms of eradicating crimes against women, that's a big issue here in South Africa. What is the way forward? Do you think there needs to be greater collaboration between women organizations as well as government and police?
That collaboration is useful, but I think again you have to look at what would be the point of that collaboration. Because I think there have been over many years, there have been attempts by women's organisations to work with the police to get them to respond better to domestic violence and rape. Some stations have taken the attitude, don't come and tell us what to do, our job. We know what we're doing, just get lost. Whereas others have embraced it and said, can you come and help train our members? Can you come and sit in the office? So I think we also have to look at breaking down that suspicion that exists between the police and communities. Because I think sometimes if you also use the language of criminals or animals, you do encourage the police to start looking at the general population very suspiciously. Is this an animal or is this a human being? And so they start to treat everybody with suspicion, thinking everybody is potentially a criminal. So I think one has got to look at how do we improve those relationships and build different kinds of and build something that is quite different here. That is not just about the language of force and militarization. I think the other thing with the police, and I want to pick up because you talked about dropping statistics. When it comes to crimes like rape and domestic violence, that's the wrong goal for the police. These crimes are so underreported. I mean, rape, our statistics are anything from only 1 in 9 to 1 in 25. You actually want those reports to increase. Because if women aren't going to the police, then it's basically saying to those who are assaulting them, there are no consequences here. Nothing's going to happen. So, I mean, I've had experiences working with women where her partner said, would you like me to call the police for you? Because when the police came, they would do nothing anyway. Sure. So I think there is a much more subtle and a variety of different responses that are going to be required to address the situation.
You mentioned politics, and it made me think of something that there's been huge criticism of decisions over years. The closing of the Scorpions, for example, those one-stop rape shops. I don't know, I can't remember the official term, but I visited one years back. Political change in South Africa, does that make you think maybe in this area we could see a positive change again?
I would certainly hope we do. I mean, I think what's important, and it's a very good thing we have a career police officer who's once again the National Commissioner, is that you actually need somebody who is deeply embedded within the police and is chiefly committed to policing to be in charge, not somebody who's going to jump and hop at whatever their political master says. And I think it's very important that we insulate those who work in the civil service, be they police officers, whoever, from their political heads, because they're there to serve people first, and they're not there to serve their political heads or their political party. So we have to find ways to do that. And I think also look at how do we create useful structures at community level where people can go and tell the police what their problems are without getting the sort of angry, hostile and aggressive response that your victim got when she tried to complain.
Yeah. But with each new police minister that comes in, what has been your experience in terms of women issues and prioritizing crimes against women?
You know, I think they're very good at saying the right things. Oh, we care, oh, this is terrible, oh, we want to do something about it. But it doesn't really translate into meaningful practice. And I think there's too much emphasis on trying to bring down the statistics, which, as I said, is the wrong target, rather than look at actually an increase would be a very good thing. It would possibly suggest that there's a greater amount of trust in the police. I think where we have to put a lot of emphasis is on police detective skills. If you look at rape, probably only about half of all rapes that are reported result in an arrest. And the cases which are most likely to result in an arrest are the ones where the perpetrator is known to the victim, because the police don't seem to have the skills all the time, to be fair to them, to go out and put the legwork in that goes into finding somebody who you don't know, who's a stranger. So I think there's got to be a lot of building of detective work skills, particularly in relation to rape. I think in relation to domestic violence, that's a challenge to government as a whole. They want a policing response only, whereas domestic violence is a problem of housing, it's a problem of economic dependence, it's a problem of job skills. So you need a much broader government response than just a policing response to domestic violence. So I would really like to encourage the Minister, if he'd like some ideas, is why not bring together a group who work on this field and get some ideas around how we can reform this?
I knew of someone and she was shot at by her boyfriend. She had no faith in the police and was scared that that arrest would lead to repercussions for her, obviously assault cases, things like that. So I hear what you're saying. You need safe houses for women, and without those things, how can women feel safe, even if the cops are doing their jobs? Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying that, and I think the other thing we need to look at, and this I'd like to take us back last week to a murder that happened in the Western Cape. We've also got to look at the problem that the police themselves have of domestic violence. We unfortunately have quite a few officers who are themselves abusive and who are themselves involved in killing their partners. And I think that needs to be a special area of focus itself. I mean, this happened last week in the Western Cape. This woman had gone to station numerous times to report her boyfriend, who was a police officer. Nothing was done. He finally killed her. So I think that's another component, because quite clearly if you're assaulting your female partner, you're not going to be terribly sympathetic to the woman who walks through the door. So we need a much more comprehensive response than the one we currently have at the moment. And I really do hope with a new minister who's open to new ideas, he will think about perhaps putting together groups who can help him think through how he gets these new ideas.
Could one of those ways look deeper into the social ills of society in dealing with sexual assault cases?
Yes, very much so, because I think we must be very clear about what is the police's job and what is the work of other government departments and broader society. It's not the police's job to be providing counselling, for example. It's not necessarily their job to be dealing with child abuse. It is their job to investigate cases to the best of their ability, to serve the people who come to them, and to make sure that those cases are good and to go to court. So I think we must get the police doing the best they can in that, and then start to identify who else in government and society must be doing different things, like running community awareness programs, ensuring that the availability of alcohol is limited, because we know that that tends to increase difficulties, making sure that there are services for children, because I think we know now that children who are in some ways abused or neglected may be at risk themselves, especially if they've been exposed to violence as children, may be run the risk of being perpetrators or victims themselves as adults. So if we invest in services now, that could help us be breaking the cycle in 10 to 15 years' time.
This is such an overwhelming, complex problem, but thank you for raising some of those very important points and responding to the Minister, Lisa Vetten from Shwaraneng, and that's where we leave it for now, Blake.
Yeah, it's 19:53. Let's take a bit of a break. We'll be back in a short while. Stay with us.